I'm your host, Erin Cline, an X-Files spooky bitch.
And I'm your other host, Stella, a slut for Star Trek, the original series. Each week, we watch 2 episodes that fit a cinematic theme, watch them together, and record our feelings. But this week, we have a kind of a curveball. We have a special guest for doing an interview.
Ooh, interview.
We're speaking with Dr. Bethan Jones, who just wrote a brand new X-Files book that I read and is excellent. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It is so good to be here.
Yeah, we're both delighted to have you. We both read a lot, but I particularly, I miss grad school, but I can't afford grad school, so I read a lot of academic texts. So this is nice to be like, ooh, fancy, advanced copy.
Oh, excellent. I could talk about stuff like this for hours. So yeah, it'll be really good.
So the title of your book is "The Truth Is Still Out There: 30 Years of the X-Files." What kind of inspired you to write this book? Like, it's called 30 plus years of the X-Files, but like why is the X-Files still relevant? Like, why are we still here in 2023 talking about the show
and a book about it?
Yeah, from 1993.
There are so many answers to that question. So I'll go back to the first one first, which is, so like, I've been a fan of the show since it aired on BBC on terrestrial television in the UK in like 1996, and I was adamant to begin with I wasn't going to like it. You know, I was like seriously into parapsychology and ghosts, and like my granddad was into science fiction, so I'd read books by like Asimov and, you know, Arthur C. Clarke, and I was like, oh, this is going to be rubbish. I'm not going to watch it. It's going to just take the mick out of all of us, you know, real science fiction fans. And then I watched It Was Darkness Falls. That was the first episode I ever saw by accident, and I was just like, oh, this is amazing. and from then, like, I just devoured it, and I bought books about the show, and I was determined I was going to write a book called The Philosophy of the X-Files. That's what I wanted to do, like, even before I went to university. And for my third year undergraduate, I wrote a paper on reality and fiction in contemporary culture using The Matrix and the X-Files as my case studies. And then a proper academic a few years later came out with a book called The Philosophy of the X-Files. Yeah. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? But yeah, I've always wanted to write about it because it's a show that speaks to so many themes, which comes on handily to your next question.
Yeah.
Because it's like the fundamental nature of the show is a quest for truth. And I think in the show that notion of truth covers a lot of different things. Like, obviously we've got, you know, the truth of what happened to Samantha, Mulder's sister. We've got like the truth of the government conspiracies.
I love the use of the quotations in the truth. Like, that's the whole point, right? The truth.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the thing, like, I'm such a friggin' academic. I'm gonna use scare quotes for so many things in this conversation. But yeah, it's like there's just a lot in the show that I think speaks to people at different times, which is kind of what I try and talk about in the book. So in terms of like the cultural elements of the show, the social elements, obviously the political elements, and that's continued. Like, even though watching the show now, it, like, you can tell it's very 90s, but because it was, yes, exactly. And it's like in I want to say Dwayne Barry, when Mulder's like pulling out maps off a shelf to look for, you know, potential places where Dwayne Barry's taken Scully, and I'm like, I just go on Google Maps, like, right. They didn't have that. But I think the fact that it was on streaming platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime in the UK, Hulu, and obviously now Disney, that it was on those during the COVID pandemic as well, meant it got a new audience. And the fact that they watched the show and they enjoyed the show and they're talking about the show shows that it's got these themes that are relevant to kind of every generation, I think. So that's what I wanted to do in the book. I wanted to look at the last 30 years of the X-Files and kind of talk a bit about why it was important then, but also why it's important now.
Yeah, and kind of why it will continue to be important too.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, particularly with the stuff that's come out in the news recently about UFOs.
Yeah.
Prime X-Files stuff.
I'm sure you experienced this, but the amount of memes we got sent that were like, Mulder was right. We were like, yeah, we get it.
Yeah. I do love that, but like every time one of my friends on Facebook sees an X-Files meme, like they tag me in it, and I'm like, I'm glad that I'm the X-Files friend. Like I'll happily accept that.
Yeah, it's not a bad brand to have. Well,
exactly.
That's kind of the conceit of our podcast, is that me and Erin have been friends since we were 16.
Long time.
Truly too long. We even lived together at one point, but she had never watched my favorite TV show, which is Star Trek, the original series, and I had never watched her. Well, I tried to watch it, but I got spooked. But so I never really watched it. And then I think it was right before the pandemic when we started this.
Yeah, we had been talking about it right before the pandemic, and then when the pandemic happened, we were like, now's the time. We have to pull the trigger on this. We did the first season totally masked because we weren't vaccinated yet too. So it was a very of its time time to do that, which like fits in what you're saying too. Like people discovered it through this time. It was like there's just the zeitgeist of we're all bored. We're sitting at home, we have nothing to do, and like I think you're right too about how the themes feel like timeless and universal in a way, even though they are somehow very 1990s. Like I think part of what happens with cultural zeitgeist stuff now is what makes it long lasting is that people want to talk about it. Like even the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. Like that. And the X-Files is full of that. So.
Yeah, and that's kind of the conceit of the show too, is like we pick a theme like you know, the best episode or Little Red Hot Pants. And we choose an episode from each of the series and we watch them together and kind of compare, contrast them, like what makes because Star Trek and the X-Files are these two like monoliths, right? And they've both had this like deep cultural impact, but they also relate to each other in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that we have found very surprising. Like we were like, oh, I'm just going to teach you about this and we'll like cram these themes together. And a lot of times we're like, wow, these are really similar in ways we were not expecting.
But it's funny too, because like Erin has obviously seen every episode of the X-Files, but the conceit of our show is that I just watched the episodes that fit the theme. So I have seen like stuff from season 11, smatterings of all the other seasons, but there are like big blind spots for me that I've either read about in academia. I'll ask them a question, and our producer Bobby and Erin, like, I was reading your book and I was like, wait, Mulder is half alien, and they were like, it's complicated.
There's one word for it.
Right, it's complicated. Their joke for William is totally normal William. But it's really interesting reading your book, and then I read another book called Fic. I'll put it in the show notes. But so I've read a lot about Diana Fowley specifically and how she relates to the show and how she's this like contrast to Scully, but also puts Scully and Gillian Anderson in this like position of being like the other woman. But I've never seen an episode with Diana Fowley, so I just have both a cultural academic perspective of it and then like this deep fan fiction knowledge of it, which I think is fascinating. I am so fascinated by the character of Diana Fowley.
I love Fowley. Like I think I talked about it in the book. I haven't read the book since, well,
you talked about her a lot.
Okay. Because I'm like, because right in the thing and then editing the thing and then proofing the thing, I was like, I'm fed up of the thing. So I haven't actually like read it properly for a couple of months. But no, I find Fowley really fascinating. And what I find especially fascinating is how much fans hate her. Because I mean, that's one of the reasons that I started my PhD, was because I wanted to look at gender and fan fiction, specifically in the X-Files, using Fowley and Scully. Because I was like, the ways that Scully gets treated in the show are sometimes really, really shitty. Fans,
yes,
Erin's nodding. But fans will go and rewrite this and be like, no, we're going to turn Scully into like a stronger character. We are going to, you know, treat this episode the way she should have been treated. And Fowley is also depicted in sort of very, you know, stereotypical, quite shitty ways as a woman. And fans are like, no, we're going to kill you in horrific ways. Like, we're not going to rewrite that narrative. And I was like, but this is so interesting as a character. Like, there's a whole section of time where she disappeared and we don't know what her motivations are, what she did. And you could write about that in fic and like turn her into a really fascinating character, but very few people do it. And I just find it fascinating. It's really interesting.
Me too. And I'm really fascinated by those fics that like rewrite the character, and like the ones that like ship her and Scully together. Like when we get to Diana Fowley, I'm going full tilt. Like I'm gonna read all those. And I feel like I have this different idea of who she is. It's really interesting watching for me because like I am into the 2023 or 2021, 20 when we started this. And so like I have a very different perspective of what gender is, what feminism is, and watching a show that presents Scully, who is like for the time, such like a strong character, super badass, like, and I love her, but like a lot of that has not aged super well. So it's very fascinating to be like, she was this like paragon of like females on television. Like literally the Scully effect is like a proven thing, but it's also like not actually sometimes, a lot of times.
I know
she's very much a character of a strong female character written by men, and like it
well,
feels really obvious a lot of times that that's what the problems are.
Totally, yeah, and very much situated in the 90s as well. Like if you think about Buffy, because she's another strong female character written by a man who has subsequently become extremely problematic. But written in the 90s, 2000s, and it shows. And I think that was
your 90s is showing.
Yeah,
exactly. But like that was one of the really frustrating things about the revival seasons, like for me and for a lot of fans, was they just completely shafted Scully and Gillian Anderson, for want of a better word. It was like there's so much that they could have done to bring even just Scully into like the here and now, and they didn't. And it was just like, I love Chris. I love him for creating the show, but oh my God.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating in your book, the chapter specific, I don't remember what chapter it was. Again, I read it in 2 days. But you talked a lot about what the newer seasons did well, specifically through the lens of the Lost Art of Forehead Sweat, which is one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah.
And how they dealt with the like post-truth, like fake news, conspiracy, like conspiracies are like en vogue now. It's not just like Mulder in a basement. Like, so you definitely give credit to the season for like what it does well, but it's so interesting the things that it does really bad, specifically some like gender representation and some like both, like it speaks very highly, or not highly, negatively of what they did when Gillian Anderson is like, I'm out forever.
Yes. Yeah, that whole, and I don't blame her either. Like that's the really sad part. It's like just even like the behind the scenes stuff, there weren't many women involved behind the scenes in like the original first 9 series and the first 2 films, and that was kind of the same in season 10. And it wasn't really until season 11 that they thought, and part of that was because Gillian Anderson had tweeted about it. They were like, oh shit, we better get some more women in. And it's just, they just did it so badly. And like the fan responses, because I put out 4 questionnaires prior to and post season 10, and then prior to and post season 11, and I had like around about 2,500 responses.
They were like, we got a lot to say.
Oh yes, there was a lot of fans that were very pissed off, completely understandably as well. Like I get it. I totally get it.
I do think that your book overall, if people are like the whole point of source, people pick it up. It's great. But I think you do a really good job of balancing like your love of the show as a fan with like some really fair critiques. So it's not, it's a good balance.
Oh, thank you. One of the things that when I was writing my PhD, my supervisor kept saying, you need to be more objective.
And you're like, but I love it.
I can't be objective. Objectivity doesn't exist as a fan. I can be subjectively objective.
You're like, it's just truth.
Exactly.
When you were doing research for the book, was there anything like approaching it as like a fan and then also as like an academic researcher? There's obviously a little difference there in like what you will and will not do. Was there anything that you as an academic researcher were like, I'm not even going to go there, I don't even want to touch this? Because there's a lot of messy stuff inside of the X-Files fandom. So I'm curious about how you in your mind were like, nope, that's the line. I don't want to, we're not even going to go there.
I think like part of it was setting up what I wanted to do with the book. And like, so like one of the things, and I not kind of like, didn't argue with my publishers about it, but I was like, this is covering the 30 years of the show. It's not just going to be looking at the new seasons, because, okay, us as fans might have read all of the literature that exists about the X-Files. You know, we'll have read all of the edited collections and stuff like that. But new fans, like people in their, you know, teens and 20s who were coming to it from Netflix or through, you know, watching specific episodes for podcast reasons.
In random orders.
Yeah.
They're not going to know the context. So I was like, what I want to do is kind of give this overview of some of like the main themes that it deals with, and touch, like thinking about the fandom, I could write a whole book on the fandom. And like, I don't think I've talked at all about RPF, real person fiction.
No, you didn't.
Okay, cool. I'm glad you know what I wrote.
Yeah.
And it was like, I mean, people know RPF now because of things like, you know, One Direction and sort of whatever. God, I've completely forgotten the name of the portmanteau. Larry Stylinson. But X-Files RPF, like back in the day, it caused so many flame wars. Like, and I don't know if I've ever admitted this, like on a recorded thing, but I used to write X-Files RPF.
Is this how you got around your no Romo? You were like, well, they can't kiss, but maybe the real people can kiss.
Exactly, yeah, the real people. That's I mean, I'm writing them as characters, and that's one of the arguments that we used to use for writing RPF, is that, you know, you're writing about the personas, you're writing about the characters of David and Gillian, because you know, you can't know the real David and Gillian. But yeah, the amount of live journal like discussions I got into about RPF, and I haven't touched on that at all, obviously. But
I was just gonna say, I came up watching the X-Files right after it finished airing, and so live journal was such a huge part of my X-Files experience.
Yes.
And like, I used to make icons under a name that was just all X-Files icons. I'd be like,
know that.
oh my god, I made thousands. I taught myself how to use Photoshop at like a professional level as like a teenager, so that I could make all these X-Files icons.
I already loved you, but like, I love you so much more.
It's like a memory that was unlocked. Like, oh my god, that's right, live journal was such a huge part.
Yeah,
of that.
I may well have like used your icon set, because the number of X-Files icons I had.
Yes, I loved every time I saw someone using one that I'd like pop up and be like, oh my god, that's mine. I was so excited about it. It made me feel so connected to the rest of the fandom. Like,
yes.
It was such a huge part of, because like I didn't watch it live, and so I couldn't have that online in the moment experience, which I'm sure you felt also as like watching it delayed in the UK too. It's different, and so live journal felt like you could jump in at any point and people were ready for you to be a fan, and it really helped foster that pre like Netflix and Hulu and like real quote social media too. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Totally write a book about that.
Yes, not like LJ was just, it was amazing, because I joined in, I think I joined in about 2007, 2008. So, you know, X-Files had been off air for 6 years at that point, and there was talk of the film, because obviously I Want to Believe came out in 2008. But there were still all of these active X-Files communities for all sorts of different stuff. And like, if you were a shipper, you could go here, and if you slashed Melda Skinner, you could go there, and if you were
I go there.
Yeah. And it was like, I made so many friends in X-Files fandom, and like I'm still in touch with them on different social media sites, and like I said, it fostered that sense of community and engagement that I think certainly for me was like a foundational memory of fandom for me. Because
yes, totally, I fully agree. I had the same experience.
Cool.
It's really interesting too, again, as like a newer X-Files fan, because I loved it. We had a couple of moments where it's like, if you don't like this episode, you're not gonna like Star Trek. If you don't like this episode, you're not gonna like X-Files, and this is a bad project. But we do like it, so it's good.
It worked out.
But so I'm a pretty new fan, and like part of my fandom is like I love reading fanfic, and you know, I write some of it, but we don't have to talk about it. But Erin was really surprised, because she was like, I was just so shocked, like so like sure that you were going to be like all in on Scully and like want to be like reading, you know, because Scully is for the bisexuals and the lesbians, right? Like they're for us. She's for us. But Skinner walked on screen and I was like, who is that man? So it's been really interesting to go online and so to find some of the old archived fic. But then there is a small little contingent of like current X-Files fic writers, which is awesome, both for like Skinner stuff, but then the traditional Mulder Scully ship. And it's just so fascinating the waves of like fandom transformative and like fic stuff, because like obviously there was a huge new wave with Star Trek when the J.J. Abrams movies came out, and now with the like Strange New Worlds, and then having both the pandemic with the, you know, rise of people just binging stuff, but also the newer seasons. Like people are like, oh, cracks knuckles, I got some stuff to say. Which has been really fascinating to also read stuff from like the 90s, and like that is good stuff, but it's so tonally different than like the stuff that is published now. It's fascinating. I love it.
I love the fact that there is still stuff. I've just pulled up AO3 and I've just done a quick search for X-Files, and there's 22,641 works with like the X-Files tag, and I love it.
And a lot of it is new, but a lot of it like they've done, people like X-Files have done the work of like being like, we're going to take the stuff that was published on all these websites that were really important to us, and we're going to move it to AO3 so that people who only use AO3 will be like, oh,
yeah, exactly. And just like in the latest fic was posted today, and it's Assistant Director Walter Skinner's surliness forces him to make amends to a woman he despises, or so he thought. So that just made me think he was
on your podcast.
Look, I fell asleep reading a Skinner fic last night. I finished her book and then I was like, well, I'm just gonna read a Skinner fic.
Nice. And that's the thing, there's so much good fic out there as well. Like
there really is.
And I love the fact, because obviously like there was Gossamer, which was a huge X-Files specific fan site back in the day, and people are writing on LJ obviously as well, and it's great that those archives, you can still find them, but people are moving things onto AO3 and newer sites so that, you know, new fans who don't remember the old days of the internet can, you know, still
it's so fascinating to watch people like forget as a culture to learn how to use that stuff, where it's like, oh yeah, I just go to Google and I find things, I just go to AO3 and I find things. It's like, no, we had to live in the mines, we had to find those sites
in the trenches,
right? We had to figure out which ones were still updating. Like it is wild to watch people be like, I don't know how to do this, and like I'm glad AO3 exists and that people are dedicated to moving that stuff on there, because people don't know how to learn it anymore, which is sad.
I know. I love there were discussions a while back about like the use of disclaimers, and you know, I used to put disclaimers on all my fic, like I don't own these characters, and there was something, I think it may have been on Tumblr, like going around, so like, why are people doing this? Like, why was this on old fic? And it was like, oh, you sweet summer child.
Know your history. Yeah, it's really fascinating being on sites like Tumblr and stuff that have like two like kind of big age gaps of like old fans TM, and I mean that with absolute love, and then like new like very young fans that are specifically for me, because like I'm in the Star Trek community. It is like really young, like freshmen in college, people who are like, what if Spock and Kirk kiss? And I'm like, what if they kiss? Make a fan cam, show it to me. It's really fascinating to like see this like huge age gap in fandom, but be like, oh, we can all, you know, there are flame wars and there are like antis and stuff, but like we can all agree that we like this one thing, and in a world that is heavily partisan, let's just say, it is kind of like it makes I just love fandom. I don't know. That's just a rant of me almost crying about fandom.
No, it is awesome. And like one of the things, because like as an academic, a lot of my work has focused on anti-fandom and dislike and toxicity, and it exists, and it's really shitty, and it's, you know, and it makes me sad sometimes that I'm kind of approaching it, because I'm researching this stuff, that I haven't got all of the squee that I used to have when it comes to fandom, and like, oh, it's such an amazing place, because I'm researching the places where it's not.
The deep dark.
Yeah, which it does make me sad, but I also like I'm going to File Fest in like a month, and I can't wait to be in just this huge place with other X-Files fans, and like we're all there for the same thing, and I'm so excited for that. Like,
Where is that?
it's in the Mall of America in Minneapolis.
Oh.
Ooh.
Yes.
Why are we
so
not going?
you should go.
Why are we going?
Well, we'll check our schedules. I feel like there's a reason we couldn't go, but we should go.
Yeah.
it
It's
looks
fun as hell.
yeah, it looks awesome, and I know like the guys that are organizing it have been involved, because obviously you've got the strikes and stuff going on in the States,
Right.
so they've been speaking to like legal teams and stuff to make sure that it can still go ahead, which it can, and you know what can and can't be done. But I'm so excited because like Chris will be there, Frank Spotnitz will be there, Darren Morgan is going to be there, and I'm so
We love Darren Morgan and his
excited.
family.
Yes. And like his brother Glenn's going to be there. There's just going to be like a ton of like behind the scenes, which is what I'm interested in, and the writers, which is what I'm interested in. So yeah, it's just going to be so cool.
It is really fascinating to go to cons that are like specifically about the one thing, because the big ones are great, like that deal with a bunch of different fandoms, but like the specific ones are so interesting because like, yeah, seeing the creators and meeting celebrities, like that is really cool, but like the thing that draws me to those conventions is like I just want to hang out with other people who like the thing that I like. You know, that's the best part.
Yeah. We never had, like in the UK growing up, we didn't have X-Files conventions, like they were only ever in the States. So I've done, you know, like London Film and Comic Con, and I've done the Walking Dead convention a few times, Walker Stalker, but I've never been to just a solely X-Files convention because they weren't a thing in the UK. So yeah, it's just gonna be awesome.
I'm excited
so
for you.
Excited for you.
You're gonna have to go through all your X-Files shirts and pick the right ones.
Yeah.
I did that the other day.
Okay.
Like, I've got a lot more than I remembered buying, which is great. I'm not complaining. I've also got one which, talking about fanfic, I won it because a piece of fanfic I wrote got like awarded a prize.
Really? That's amazing.
Yeah, back in like 2009. So I won an X-Files like waterproof coat and an X-Files t-shirt. And I can't remember why I said that. There was a point.
Because you had an X-Files shirt?
Yes, yeah. So I've got like a ton of X-Files t-shirts I'm going to be taking with me, and like long sleeve shirts, and yeah, I've got my plain clothes planned. I've got what I'm planned because I'm actually launching the book there as well. So I've got a panel on the Friday morning, so I know what shirt I'm wearing for that. It's like, yeah, I've got my entire wardrobe.
So exciting.
That's really exciting. Speaking of the book and the launch date, like when can our like listeners like get your book?
So they can pre-order it now. It is up on the publisher's website, which is Fayetteville Mafia Press.
We'll link it, obviously, too,
because I cannot remember the link off the top of my head. So it's available from there now. I know you can get it on like Amazon and stuff as well. It's available in ebook and print format, and the print format exists in real life now. It's out there in the world as an actual thing, which is exciting and also terrifying. So they can order it from there, and it's due out, the actual like formal publication day is the 12th of September, but my publishers have said, you know, they'll post out early, and then I'll be taking some copies to File Fest as well, so people, if they particularly want to, can come and say hi and get a book.
That's awesome. So to close this, like I kind of wanted to ask you some like more fanish questions. So like the conceit of our show is that we pick a theme, and the first theme that we ever did was the hook. So we both had to pick an episode that we were like, if you've never seen an episode of the show, this like shows you what the show is, but it's also a good episode, so you want to keep watching. What would be your hook?
I think it would probably be, it's going to be one of two. It's either they're both from season 1. It's either going to be the Erlenmeyer Flask, or it's going to be EBE, because they're both
big run in the house.
Yes.
Like they're both myth arc episodes, and the myth arc does go downhill a little bit.
Yes.
That's a slight understatement towards the end. But in the early seasons, like the myth arc is brilliant, and you've got Deep Throat in season 1, who's like the best informant as far as I'm concerned.
We love Big Ron in this house.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And it's just, it just sets up the whole premise of the show, and it really gives you the sense that there is something going on and it's high stakes and you want to get to the bottom of it. So yeah, it would be one of those two.
She picked Bad Blood.
Yeah.
Nice.
Actually, that's not true.
I thought you picked Bad Blood.
No, for the hook, I actually picked Clyde Bruckman.
That's right.
Because it was early enough that I picked the Bad Blood one for the best. That's one of my favorite ones. I feel like that one hits like the perfect middle ground of like, it's funny, it's dark, it's got a lot of like interesting camera work that's done. The guest stars are very good, so that's probably why I picked that one. Clyde Bruckman, I feel like, is the same idea but for the comedy episodes, where it's such a great introduction to the monster of the week and gives you such a good vibe for their relationship, Scully and Mulder's, and like the way that they interact with everyone. That's why I picked it. What would you pick as the best one, like your personal favorite?
Jose Chung.
Oh yeah,
yes. I love it.
It's so good. Like everyone in it hits so well. Part of the reason I didn't pick Jose Chung and picked Clyde Bruckman instead is because I feel like Jose Chung is the next step up from that. It like ramps up in a way that I feel like the more episodes you've seen, you appreciate the like meta parts of it more too.
Yeah.
Totally, yeah. And that's the reason why I love it, because it's just so meta. It's ridiculous.
Yes.
Yeah, in the book, I really liked how you used the framing of Jose Chung and Lost Art. Is that the one of Reggie? Yeah. The comparison and juxtaposition of like Clyde Bruckman in the early seasons and then Lost Art for It's Wet in the later seasons, and how they're both very similar in that they're dealing with the like what is truth, but they are from the 90s lens and the like 2000s lens, which I really liked.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I love Darren Morgan. He's one of my favorite writers on the show. Like Vince Gilligan is one of the others, because his stuff is amazing. But I think what Darren does really well is he kind of gets to the crux of an issue, but he does it in a really comedic way, and it just works really well. Because I mean, and there were some fans thinking about Lost Art that were like, this was too on the nose, particularly the bit at the very end where you get this alien come down talking about building a wall around Earth, and some fans were like, this was too much.
I thought it was just enough.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's what Darren does really, really well. And like you said, it's, Jose Chung's talks about truth in a very 90s way, and Lost Art talks about it in a very now post-truth kind of way. And they both work really well, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Also the line, where are they taking Reggie?
Yeah.
No.
It's so good. That's kind of all I had to chat about. I think we covered enough of your book without giving too much away so that people still are inspired to buy it.
Thank you.
Before we let you go, do you want to kind of give the traditional podcast rundown of where people can find you and follow you for more updates?
Yes, I certainly can. I'm on Twitter /X, whatever we're calling it these days. So I'm on there as @memories_child, which is an X-Files reference because it was a lyric used in one of the songs from 2008, I want to believe. In fact, I'm on pretty much all social media as Memories Child, including my live journal. So yeah, if you particularly want to read really old X-Files fanfic.
Erin's like, maybe I do.
Maybe I do want that.
Yeah, but no, I'm on Twitter, like most. That's kind of where I most often post about stuff. I'm on Instagram. I'm on the various, post-Twitter iterations that have come up. And I've got a website that I don't really update very often, which is bethanjones.wordpress.com.
Excellent. Well, and if any of our listeners goes to the Files convention, make sure you go say hi and pick up a book.
Come and say hello.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Sorry about the technical difficulties earlier. But it was lovely to talk to you. I'm so glad that you reached out. Not only because I felt very fancy getting a press release of the book, but also because it's our favorite thing to do is talk about the things that we love through an academic lens, but also just to geek out with new people. So thank you for reaching out to us.
Oh no, thank you. It's been awesome. Like honestly, I love talking about stuff like this, and I'm so happy to do it with you two.
Yay.
Perfect.
Oh, I'm so glad. All right. We will let you go then.
Yeah.
And we hope that you have a great night.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Xtra is created and written by Stella Cheeks, Erin Cline, and Bobby Hoffman, and produced by Bobby Hoffman for NYD Productions. Our show theme is Alien Spy by Ionix, and our show art was made by Jonathan Curtis.